Crystal asks, how can you make students better writers without having them write more, which they may consider as punishment once they arrive in secondary level?
Okay, so you can have them do writing that isn't graded. You can have them do things that will feed into writing that is verbal instead, and of course having them read more. So find out, maybe you already know, what sorts of writing they're already doing that they don't consider writing. So they're probably texting a lot, and they may be on social media a lot. So I would get them involved in projects that let them do that. And that's a great way to already start talking to them about audience, because I've got a 16-year-old in the next room who has already told me how the way that I text with her is different from the way she texts with her friends. She's super tuned into this kind of nuance of audience, and that's happening in any kind of communicative stream. Ask them to bring in some texts and share them and talk about who they were communicating with, and ask them to explain things to you as an older person than they are. What does this mean? What does that mean? Ask them to explain emojis to you. And maybe they could do short videos explaining emojis, explain emojis to your grandmother. And then after they do the video, have them say, okay, take one of those and just write it up in a short paragraph that we can put up somewhere, collect somewhere. So anything that you can do, they're already writing. I get totally that they don't want to write for you and they consider it punitive, but find the places where they're already doing it, try to celebrate that, and try to reassure them that they are actually pretty smart communicators. And draw them out that way. That's the way that I would try it. If you've already done that, let me know. I'll see if I can think of something next. I could ask the 16-year-old next door too.
That was really creative. I'm impressed. Another question, Brady, do you have any suggestions about how to move writers from mimicking development to a place where they authentically develop their own skills?
That's a great question. And the answer is they have to do more of it. So as you get to know the student, you can maybe get a sense for the extent to which they're mimicking and repeating because they are not comfortable yet, versus they kind of don't want to do the work. So in the first case, you want to reassure them and let them do a little bit more of it. Sometimes you'll see, you see this a lot in college instructors will assign compare and contrast essays, and you'll get students who can't really compare and contrast two things, but they can write about them next to each other. So they'll do a paragraph on one thing and a paragraph on the other thing. And then it's a question of sitting down with the student and saying, you know, you're waiting for that spark. You can do a little talking with them on it or put them in groups to do it. If you're not doing compare contrast, if you're doing like a research paper, you want them to develop ideas. One good way is to put them in small groups and have them do like a kind of a fishbowl activity where they talk, right? So they've written their idea 3 times over. Make them then talk for 30 or 60 seconds about it and add a question or an angle that they hadn't thought about before. Or have them say their thing that they said and have the other people in the group ask them questions. Ask them for more detail or ask them for personal experiences related to the topic. Very often using that conversational framework will help, because once they're on stage and they're speaking, the brain will kick in and they will come up with something to say because they don't want to feel silly in front of their friends. Whereas with writing, they can just kind of dig in and write the words over and over again. So I'm a big believer in stepping into that conversational frame to kind of break up some of that stolid sort of bricklaying work that they're doing by just repeating the ideas over and over again. But do recognize that some of that repetition and mimesis is a necessary step for development. You're kind of looking for an opportunity where you can point it out to them and say, here you say the same thing 3 times, but here you actually introduce a new thought. I want to hear more about that. And rather than just saying this is good and this is bad, say, this is interesting. I want to hear more about this. Here, I'm kind of getting bored because you've told me this 3 times. So take those out and then I'll be able to pay more attention to the exciting idea in the next. It's just giving them multiple times to try and do the cool thing and then jumping on that and pushing them forward there. But it does take sometimes a lot of time of just letting them spin their wheels and telling them, keep going, you'll get there eventually.
Awesome, thank you. I think we have time for maybe two more, at least one more question. This is from Brady. Do you have any suggestions on how to help students do reader-focused edits in a grammatical fashion? Like when you're teaching commas, how a teacher might guide a student away from putting a comma where you breathe while remaining focused on the big problem?
Are you talking about students helping, are we talking about students helping each other, or the instructor working with the student in this?
I believe so. Yeah, that was just an example provided.
Yeah. Well, I'm sorry, which is, it's the instructor or the peers?
This peer edits.
Peer edits, okay.
Brady says, sorry, Brady says instructor.
Instructor, okay. So I would take this iteratively, and I would look at a returning process. So maybe you do one pass where you're gonna say, put a comma where you have to take a breath, and then send it back and say, okay, so now we have places where there's a breath, but it's still unclear to me for this reason. I should qualify here. This back and forth, if you try and do it in writing, it will take forever and they will never learn anything. Much quicker if you can maybe do a Zoom session with them 5 minutes and just say, let's put this sentence up and look at it together. And so you've changed it this way. Now when I read it, my experience is this. And you might, at that point, you might start throwing in, so this is a comma splice, and the reason it's a problem is because you can see I can't breathe or whatever. Because you put commas in where I had to breathe, but I had to breathe there. Now I'm kind of in the second half of the sentence, but the ideas from the first half are so far away that I'm losing track of what's going on. So let's think about a new solution. Could we split the sentence in half here? You can throw out ideas like that for the student if they are bereft of ideas, or if they keep trying solutions that make things worse, because that happens a lot grammatically too. They'll just kind of like, especially with things like preposition usage that's just idiomatic. I always use those opportunities as a chance to throw in a little grammar on the side. Well, this is called a dangling modifier, and the reason it's a problem is because now I don't know who the subject of the sentence is. Did you see how confused I was? So it needs to go here instead, and that fixes it. So I would do 1 or 2 sentences like that with the student when they're at that stage, and then say, now go through the rest of this paragraph, see if you can find other things like that to fix. Grammar is just, it's never going to settle down early. You just have to, again, you're building a habit here of sending them back and trying to make it cleaner. You can sometimes key give them minimal information and just say, hey, in this paragraph, I noticed 3 sentence boundary problems at least. Go back and check each sentence and see if you can fix the punctuation to make the sentences sort of stick together better. See me if you can't do that, and we'll talk about it. We know from Rich Haswell's research that students can find and correct about 70% of those sentence level errors if they're just given a minimal amount of information about where the reader saw a problem. It's just the process of going back and looking again, the reader saying, oh, something wrong here, and sending them back, get them started on that task. Then it's just kind of an iterative process of let them try, tell them if it worked and made it better or not, try again.
Okay, wonderful. That is all the time we have for the Q&A.